Satyagraha is a law of universal application. Beginning with the family, its use can be extended to every other circle. Gandhi, March 31st, 1946.
It's been pointed out for a while now, I'm not sure exactly where I first saw it, that here in the West we believe in laws that apply to physical reality, but we've been slow to realize that there are equally exact laws that apply to, shall we say, spiritual or emotional reality. And Gandhi once said the success of our efforts was mathematically proportionate to the purity of our means. It's actually quite liberating to realize this, because in all of those circles of relationship that Gandhiji was talking about, we know that we can have reliable results from our own behavior, provided we realize the importance of our mental state. It makes a very big difference whether you say to somebody, okay, have what you want, or yes, I'll be happy to let you have this part, but no more. Somehow, in a mysterious way, our mental state affects the whole social field, shall we say, and other actors are sensible to that. They do pick it up in their own neural networks, and some of the science for this has been worked out, but it remains a non-physical phenomenon primarily.
I find this to be very inspiring as a reminder to recall that these rules of nonviolence that we're working out and following through with, these aren't rules necessarily like external laws that are being applied to us, but rather laws that are more like the laws of gravity. These are things that we come to see are part of our nature. And so, for instance, there was a nonviolence researcher who made a statement that the reason they came to appreciate peace and nonviolent work was when they realized that there is nothing that traumatizes a human more than violence. Even if the violence wasn't done to you directly, but you're just around it, it's traumatizing. We all have had experiences where there's violence around us. If we're very lucky, we only see it at a distance. But it's certainly understandable when that trauma then impacts us. We also find that the people doing the violence are traumatized, called a moral injury. It's recognized by psychologists around the world now. And so how can this be a part of human nature? If we are doing something that is natural to us, that humans are built to be violent creatures, then we would thrive on it. In some of the fun science fiction stories that I follow, there are always warlike species that we come across as we travel through the stars. And those people thrive on violence. They are edified by it. They become better people. They find themselves healing as they explore violence. And humans are the exact opposite of that. There is nothing that violence touches that doesn't leave destroyed, inside and outside. And yet, peace work, compassionate work, extending a loving hand always heals. It heals the person doing it as much as it heals the person who is being lifted up by that support. And when we recognize that it is a part of our innate nature, we start to apply it. First, hopefully within the small circle, these three harmonies, as Michael talks about them, the first harmony in this case being ourselves, our own inner work and lives, developing self-compassion, healing our lives, removing those vestiges of violence, and healing the trauma from the violence we've experienced. And then we extend that out, as Gandhi says here, to the family. We reach out to our community, and we begin to heal the violence there. And then, once we've worked through those things, then we become extensions of peace and nonviolence. And we begin to extend it out to the larger community of humanity and all sentient beings everywhere. And everything we touch within us and without becomes healed, becomes better. And it is the exact opposite of violence. It's one of the ways that we can define violence, is that which destroys inside and outside everything it touches. And then this true satyagraha work is something that heals everything it touches. That's how you know you're doing it right.
I cannot impose my personal faith on others, never on a national organization, but I can try to convince the nation of its beauty and its usefulness. That's Gandhi, November 20th, 1924.
We have a term for what Gandhi is referring to here. It's the term persuasion versus coercion. Persuasion is infinitely preferable if you can do it, if you have enough time, because in persuasion, you end up with a permanent solution and with widening relationships, which, as Gandhi felt, and we tend to agree with him, is the purpose of life, actually. Whereas you should only do coercion in an extreme situation when you don't have an option. If somebody is being attacked on the street with weapons, you're not going to stand in front of that person and try to reason with him. You'll do anything possible to thwart that attack. But this is a rare situation. I wish it were a little rarer. But most of us will go through life without ever meeting that situation. But we'll be in many, many situations where if we can persuade another person, things can be adjusted amicably. And the key to such persuasion, the key to your being effective, is respect. Always have respect for the other, and always know that the person is not the opinion. The more that you accept the person as a fellow creature with that of God in them, as the Quakers would say, the more strongly you can resist what you consider to be their bad programs.
I find this to be very important. In this case, Gandhi here is talking about his personal faith, and that his religion, of course, was a central tenet of his life. And to recognize that we need to allow this sense of freedom, because to impose an idea on somebody is an act of violence, to try to force somebody to think something. I'm a staunch advocate against the prevention of indoctrination of children. In the spaces where I live, there's a lot of religious indoctrination of children, and it does a lot of damage because kids are built in such a way that they believe what their elders tell them. And if we are able to instead create a space in which the children see the good works around them, they see the truth of the world, and they come to their own conclusions about what is right for them, and a belief system, and a series of actions. And as Gandhi here is saying, its beauty and its usefulness. An idea that is pushed on somebody that becomes a burden is neither beautiful or useful. Instead, what we need to do is allow them to see the fruit and flower of our actions and our behavior. And then they say, wow, how is it that you are coming to that conclusion in life, that you are kind and gentle, and you are not suffering from greed or hate or envy? And then they begin to follow in the path. Not the path of indoctrination, but rather the path that you are modeling as a good human. And when that expands out to the level of a national organization, because as we know, as a people, we tend to follow the leaders in our world. The leaders of a corporation tend to strongly influence the culture of that business. And similarly, the presidents and kings and the leaders of nations around the world, their behavior strongly influences the culture of that society. We see it happen over and over again. And if we can, instead of having beliefs imposed upon us, we are able to learn to look around and see what actually suits us. When we look around and we see the good works done by others, we say, oh, how did you come to that conclusion? Because we'll want to follow those people, and we'll naturally stay away from the people that are propagating some pretty awful ideas.
My life has been an open book. I have no secrets, and I encourage no secrets. Gandhi, March 19th, 1931.
This may sound kind of simple, but I find it to be very, very challenging. What it means is you will not do anything that doesn't stand up to exposure. Of course, there's such a thing as privacy, and you have to respect other people's wishes, but those are not really very often political situations. In politics, if you make it a rule to be open, which he did, it restricts you from wrong behavior. So it's, again, something that just, it sounds like almost like a platitude on the surface, but it's a very powerful mechanism. And the more you can adopt it, let me use one of his words, the purer your behavior will be, meaning free from animosity toward other persons.
I also find this to be such a powerful idea, and let's put this quote here in context, because in this moment then, this is 1931, in 1930, Gandhi had spent a couple of decades, preparing and training with his volunteers and his ashrams, practicing nonviolence. How do I respond when somebody confronts me? How do I respond when I'm knocked down and I think I'm going to die? Practicing peace for decades. And then in 1930, the Salt March comes, where they march a couple hundred miles to the ocean with crowds of people in order to practice this civil resistance, this nonviolence, this unwillingness to follow an unjust law. And then they throw him in prison for it. And he just gets out of prison. And he's talking, and he says, I have no secrets, and I encourage no secrets. His willingness to lay himself bare to the whole world is astonishing. And often, in fact, of course, as we say sometimes, Gandhi wasn't a perfect human. And there's a lot that can be leveled against him in criticism. And you'll find people certainly willing to do it. And the thing that they often will not talk about is that he himself is the one that reveals those damning secrets, or that dirty laundry, so to speak, the things that make you look at him sideways and say, oh, he wasn't perfect. And he himself was willing to share those openly because he didn't want people to think of him as a guru, as an enlightened being, as a saint, whatever word we use. He encouraged people to see him as a human. And because of that, he was free. And he set his own followers free, saying, you could do this. All you have to do is have the will and the opportunity, and to take that opportunity. And I find that so inspiring. And from the Taoist perspective, of course, we might say something like, allow your heart mind to be like a mirror. I don't hold on to anything. I reflect everything evenly. We're not trying to present falsehoods or illusions. We're not trying to trick anybody. We're not trying to trick ourselves. And that state of mind has to be the same in every part of your life. Your interpersonal life, your life at home, your life with the sense of how people are seeing you at work and, of course, in the larger public, which for Gandhi was pretty large. And the courage to do that, to just be yourself, flaws and all, is remarkable. And I hope that you find that to feel the same way.
The more we give up our attachment to the physical frame of the person we love, the purer and more expansive our love grows. That's Gandhi in Day to Day with Gandhi, Volume 1.
This is, again, very challenging, very rewarding, and it requires us to really be what the Buddha said, swimming upstream. Everything in our culture is telling us that the world is physical, people are physical, they are to be judged on their physical attractiveness, and this creates a lot of pain and a lot of confusion and a lot of dissatisfaction. Now, we can't just switch that off all at once, but we can remind ourselves that it's the inner person that we really love. And even that little reminder at specific times, at appropriate times, can change our mental attitude. And the remarkable thing is when we no longer regard another person as merely a physical object, we no longer regard ourselves as merely a physical object. And that leads to a much healthier, more effective, and more satisfying life. So hooray for this thing, difficult as it may sound.
And that certainly is difficult for a lot of people. Attachment in general, from this Buddhist context, although of course Gandhi wasn't specifically coming from a Buddhist context, but our attachment to our physicality and ourselves, the people that we claim to love, brings us a lot of suffering. In fact, we can correlate a one-to-one. The more attached we are to something, the more we suffer. And that realization is a big deal in our internal practices and meditations. And when we allow ourselves to be free of that attachment with, for instance, the person that we are in a relationship with, then we are able to let them change. They can have bad days and good days, and we love them for both of those things. And of course, we're going to change. We're all going to change. And so if you want that relationship to last more than a few years, then giving them the grace to change is a bare minimum to have any kind of healthy relationship at all, because they're people. And if you're not letting them be people, there's something deeply wrong, and we cannot use the term love in that relationship. And more than that, then how are we treating ourselves? If we only are attached to the way things look, then, and our experience of physicality, then of course, as we change, which we do, and as we start to fall apart, which we all do, we suffer more and more. And it's something I see in the clinic a lot. People come in and say, gosh, 20 years ago I was doing this and it wasn't a problem. And you want to look at them and sort of shrug. And for me, as a 50-year-old, basically, speaking to people who are much older, I can only reference what I've heard a lot throughout my life from the people who are in bodies that are getting older. But of course, when you look inside, we still feel the same. We're shocked when we look in the mirror and we see somebody who's getting older. Wow, how did this happen? I still feel the same, which is this essential deep revelation that comes from our meditation practices, from our insight about the nature of ourselves. And if we allow ourselves to make that recognition in our own lives, within our own bodies, we start to enjoy our lives a lot more because we're not any more attached to this process of something that is decaying and changing, falling away, it gets sick, it gets broken. It's going to happen, and that way you can enjoy your life anyway. And with your chosen partner, whoever they are, as they change, as they decay and fall apart, it can even be met with a kind of love and gentle humor as we watch these bodies fall away and our worlds change. And it keeps us from having a huge amount of pain toward the ends of our lives and as life travels on. So I certainly agree with Gandhi that that expansive, deep, pure love comes from experiencing and seeing something deeper. And again, the older meaning of the common Indian phrase, namaste, that idea of I'm recognizing that pure light within myself, that light of pure consciousness within myself, something deep, and I see that in you too. More than the clothes you're wearing, more than how I think you look, more than what I want from you, I'm relating to that part of you. The light in me is relating to that same light in you, and that relationship is something fantastically different and worthy of seeking.
A small body of determined spirits, fired by an unquenchable faith in their mission, can alter the course of history. That's Gandhi, November 19th, 1936.
Well, this may sound a bit mysterious. One simple way of understanding it is a small group having faith in their cause will attract others, and it does seem to be a universal principle operating here, such that if your commitment is to something really good, namely something that'll be helpful for humanity, it will attract others, even if it means that they have to rethink what their culture is telling them. If you regard a person, be it yourself, be it someone else, as not just a body, but to use a simple formula that's serviceable, body, mind, and spirit, it helps greatly to keep you oriented and, as I was saying, more effective.
It reminds me of a quote, a study from our friend, somebody that we look up to, Erica Chenoweth, as a researcher who was a person working with and studying the military, missiles and bombs and guns, and using their skills within math and statistical analysis to see what was the most functional way for governments to change, for instance. Is it military uprising? Is it assassination of a dictator? And also looking at all of the nonviolent civil resistance methods of making change, either at a local level and at a grand level. And what Erica noticed is that basically between 3 and 4% of the local population needs to rise up in order for things to change. And that is an incredibly small number for civil revolution, peaceful revolution. So the number usually quoted is 3.5%. And so here within the United States, for instance, Rivera's son was mentioning that that's only 10 or 11 million people to change the whole of the United States. And we're often getting close to those numbers. And in smaller groups, of course, it's the same number. It's the same kind of percentage for shift. So in your local town, in the causes within your community that you care about, get that small group of determined people who are fired up about change, something inspiring, something hopeful, something that touches that deeper part of human nature that wants things to be better, but sometimes wonders if it can be. Get that 3.5%, this tiny number of people together, and shift will happen. And like the old quote says, that group of small, determined people willing to change the world, not only can they, but indeed it is the only thing that has ever changed the world. And I find that inspiring.
The conviction has been growing upon me that things of fundamental importance to the people are not secured by reason alone, but have to be purchased with their suffering. That's Gandhi, March 19th, 1931.
Yes, hard as it may seem, Martin Luther King made the same discovery, which he put in different words, namely that unearned suffering is redemptive. And this is really the core to how nonviolence works. In violence, you try to impose suffering on the other person. In nonviolence, you try to awaken the conscience of the other person in a very effective way, which is by taking the suffering on yourself. Now, of course, this suffering can be a wide range. It can be anything from a minor inconvenience to the risking of your very life. If you keep in mind the formula that we're body, mind, and spirit, as Gandhi always recurred to this in one form or another, it helps you to realize that we are not extinguished by the biological death of the material being. Of course, we're going to protect that for as long as possible. We're going to cherish that, take care of it, get proper health care, etc., etc. But it is very liberating to realize that that is not purely and simply who we are.
And again, this is coming from that very particular context that both Michael and Gandhi speak from, this deep religious and spiritual conviction about the nature of the body and the nature of the human spirit. And even if we don't have that conviction, maybe we think that this body and this life is all there is, even in that context, we can still find things that are larger than ourselves. We can find that sense of community. We can relate to that deep sense that if one of us is not free, then none of us are free. If one of us is in bondage, then all of us are, because that means we're living in a community that is unfair and unsafe to somebody. And like that old philosophical trick, if you were to be born blind and randomly into our world, randomly assigned a lotto number, a life, and before you were born into this world, some divine being said, "Hey, where would you like to be born? Would you like to be born in this world?" You're not going to know who you'll be. You're not going to be knowing where you'll be born, which continent you'll be on, which age and time, how you look, how you seem to other people, the intelligence and the physical capabilities. That's all going to be random. What kind of world would you want that to be, that random birth occurs in? Of course, you'd want it to be a world that is egalitarian, that's safe for everybody, that treats everybody with respect and love, and tries to uphold their the best possibilities and purpose for their life. And in that random, blind choice, no matter where you land, you'll be safe, and you'll live a balanced, happy life, because that's a possibility in our world. We want to have that for everybody, so that not just a few of us are comfortable and happy and safe, but rather all of us are. And we have not quite managed that yet. And so the willingness to have that courage of our convictions, that this is the world that we want, and to then step outside of our own comfortable bubble, if we were lucky enough to be born into that small percentage of people who are comfortable and safe and healthy and happy, then it's very important that we do more than just put a sign on our lawn or a sticker on our car. Those are okay things too, and maybe I wear the t-shirt. But perhaps to lean a little bit outside of that bubble of safety, at least lean up to the edge of it and say, hey, calling out to the other side, you're not alone, calling out injustice as you see it. Do what you can to expand that bubble of safety until all of us are in it. May we all be happy. May we all be healthy. May we all be safe.
My effort should never be to undermine another's faith, but to make them a better follower of their own faith. It's Gandhi from Mahatma, Volume 2.
Of course, by faith here, Gandhi means their religious affiliation or whatever religion that they believe in, including today is very often spiritual, not religious. This drew upon a tremendous advantage that I've come to appreciate. In fact, I've appreciated it deeply for a long time. The recognition that religions are paths. They are not complete descriptions of reality. They are paths for the person to discover reality. Therefore, hey, if your path works for you, it's a valid religion. It doesn't say anything about whether your path will work for me and whether my path will work for you. And this simple realization, if you think about it, could save so much of the warfare and the suffering and the alienation that goes on in the world because people identify others and themselves with their beliefs. So to correctly put religions in context is, again, saving us from a great deal of violence on many levels.
And again here, the context of Gandhi's own life is important. If you haven't looked into this time period in history with the colonialism of India and the huge religious warfares that were going on, and of course, still going on. So much pain and so much loss and suffering in people's lives, and all around this idea of faith. The need to be right. The need for my path to be the path for everybody, no matter what. And it calls to mind this differentiation that I consider to be pretty important. One, in English, in the culture that I grew up in, we would often talk about the golden rule. What's the golden rule? The golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which is certainly a reasonable step, but it's not quite far enough. And so these days you'll hear ethicists talk about the platinum rule, platinum being better than gold in this case. Better than gold is do unto others as they would have you do unto them, which is to say, treat others the way they want to be treated, not how you want to be treated. Because everybody is following their own path, has their own needs, and we don't get to subject everybody to our whims. At least not if we want, again, a world that is balanced and whole and healthy. And so at least follow the golden rule, better evolve to the platinum rule, and give everybody space, give everybody grace, and let's make this world a better place.
I have wisdom enough to know my limitations. Gandhi, July 23, 1938.
You will now appreciate why I like Socrates so much. He was the one who said, when he was judged by a prophet-mantic institution in Delphi to be the wisest man alive, he said, no, wait a minute, that can't be true. And by examining other people thoroughly, making himself thoroughly unpopular, he realized his famous formula, oida hati uk oida. I know that I don't know. Whereas other people, you never can know everything, right? But to the extent that there's a pretense to yourself and or to others where you think you know something that you don't, if you start mansplaining because of it, then that actually is much worse than saying, I don't know. And of course, when you can admit that you don't know something, it helps you become more humble. It helps you become more oriented to who you really are in this universe. It gives you immediately respect for others who also have a set of things that they know and things that they don't know. And that leads directly to nonviolence.
So important. Recognizing, again, our own humanity, not judging ourselves for our own limitations or others, not assuming that we have to fit a certain mold and to be good enough in order to live a life as a human. These are common problems, even within our modern self-help community. And to recognize that in your own life, right now, if you were to list the top 10 convictions, the things that you know are true, the things that you base your values around, it's nearly 100% that one of those is wrong. Either wrong in detail or fact, or wrong in the sense that you will certainly change your mind about it in a decade or two. And having that humility to recognize that quality of yourself, that even your most deeply held values and convictions are malleable as we grow and we change and we learn more things. And you can certainly think of several things that 10 years ago that you used to believe that now you know are wrong. But if you had said that to yourself 10 years ago, there would have been a fight. And to have that humility and that willingness to say, gosh, I don't know everything, which is such a ridiculous thing to have to admit to. But sometimes we need to tell that to ourselves. And then to recognize that other people are in the same boat. And that if you believed the same things that they did, you'd probably be behaving the same way. And maybe one day they'll look back and they'll shake their head at their own foolishness, just like you can do now. I hope that you can do now. And that gives so much space for other people to be themselves and for you to be yourself, to have a little bit of humbleness around the things that you claim, and to allow people just to be themselves. I find that so important.
If we could erase the eyes and minds from religion, politics, economics, and so forth, we shall soon be free and bring heaven upon earth. Gandhi, Young India, September 3rd, 1926.
Once again, we're seeing Gandhi being very traditional, using the traditional values of the ancient Vedanta and applying them, which is perfectly natural, to our modern condition. And here he talking not about the external circumstances that we pay a lot of attention to, but about to the inner disposition. And the one big problem in the inner disposition is the focus on what they called in India ahamkara and mamakara, to see everything from the personal perspective. How does this affect me? And when we do that, ironically, we don't serve our own best interest. In seeing ourselves as part of the whole and helping the whole, that we ourselves get the greatest benefit, psychologically and every other way.
And this is a tremendous part of Taoist study, of course, as well, that the sage is free of the self. And when we look at these various components here that Gandhi's talking about, from religion, it's about my gods, my belief. In politics, it's about my party, my power. In economics, it's about my money, my advantage. And when we see the world from that light, which is just so common, of course, everything ends up being a competition. Everything is a challenge. Everything is a threat to be defended from. You can take from somebody else, and you are actually made more instead of actually diminished. And if we can shift from that perspective, becoming free of the I and the me and the mine, then we become part of something greater again. And we can start to look around at we. And suddenly our lives have more meaning. Because again, plenty of studies show that very, very wealthy, very, very powerful people are not more happy than the average person. In fact, they're often far more unhealthy and imbalanced, as we can see if you look around the world. And yet they crave more and they need more. They have to have more. And of course, we call this greed. And it is a major problem for them, of course, because it's not bringing them happiness. They're looking in the wrong place. But it also harms everyone else in their society, in their community, in their lives. And if we want to be free and to, as he says here, to bring heaven upon the earth, we have to have this quality, again, like they say in Taoism, to lose ourselves without getting lost. We lose that I, that mine, that me, but we don't get lost in that process. Instead, what we have is our true self, which does not need those things. And then we're able to become part of something greater. We're able to participate in love and compassion and these greater aspects of humanity that would restore the world for all of us.
One cannot forgive too much. Gandhi, April 2nd, 1931.
The unwillingness to forgive others is causing most of the violence in the world. You can see that on the international level and on the individual level. And it's a very hard thing to do psychologically, to forgive someone that we believe has offended us, hurt us in some way. But it's a tremendously liberating thing to do. I'm reminded, as I often am, of my favorite quote from St. Augustine, who said, "Imagine that people thinking that their enemy could do them more harm than their enmity, which they hold against him." There are many stories in which Gandhi refused to press charges against people who had injured him, in some cases severely. And at first blush, it offends our sense of justice, But as a matter of fact, it was far better for him because he didn't carry that resentment. Of course, that's the critical thing. You have to just not only forgive people on the surface level, but really forgive them in your heart. And when you can do that, it's far better for you. And it's far better for them. There were very few cases of offenders who took advantage of his generosity. Mostly they were deeply impressed, and it helped them to improve.
This quality of forgiveness is talking about healing. And so if I rephrase it, I can say, one cannot heal too much. That would be strange to say, okay, I've had enough healing. You want to become whole. And these qualities that we walk around with, these grudges, this enmity, this internal violence, this need for vengeance, this deep simmering anger, whatever it is that we're walking around with, that requires forgiveness, that requires healing. It certainly does harm in our world, because usually it doesn't just stay pointed at that person that you think requires your vengeance, of course. It comes out, if you have kids, they know that you're angry, and it shows up at work, it shows up everywhere in your life. Ask your friends, they'll tell you, oh sure, we can tell that you're bitter. And that bitterness eats into us. It's poison. The Buddha tells a story about somebody coming to my door and saying, here, take this poison. Here's this fire. He said, no thanks, I do not accept this gift of yours. You keep it. And so that person then that is having this simmering fire of anger, this poison of bitterness inside them, it just eats them alive inside. We all know people that this happens to. And if forgiveness is the word that we use to heal that quality, whatever word we use to heal this deep divide within ourselves, that is super important. And even in Chinese medicine, there are specific symptoms around bitterness and grudge holding and the inability to forgive. So for your own sake, putting aside the healing that would bring to your community, both local and far away, but for your own sake, learning to forgive, learning to set down that quality of bitterness, this clenched jaw, this clenched heart, that is very worth pursuing. And I highly recommend many classes about this. You can find them for free online if you need to. If you're here, that means you have access to them. Meet with a therapist and a counselor. Set yourself free. And in a larger context, of course, a societal level, all too often we let those simmering feelings dictate public policy. And of course, we can see where that goes. So set yourself free, and by virtue of doing that, start to set your community free. And maybe one day we'll all be free.
A sincere prayer can work wonders. March 24th, 1920.
This might be, again, one of the things that's a little bit hard for us to wrap our minds around, but Gandhi actually believed that there were spiritual forces at work in the universe that are all controlling, although not usually visible to us, and that we individual human beings can affect them very powerfully by our state of mind. And he explained that even petitionary prayer was not so much a question of getting what you wanted from some external deity, but putting yourself in the right frame of mind to receive it. That's really the key to all successful nonviolent change, is not to harbor ill will in your heart against anyone, and it's hard to harbor ill will when you're praying for someone.
There certainly can be great wisdom in prayer, and every person listening to this will have a different perspective. That word goes through a different filter for every single person. They hear it, they feel it differently. But what about simply this idea of sincerity? In Taoist practice, one of the things that's very important to cultivate while we do our own chanting practice and meditation methods is to cultivate sincerity. And this sincerity doesn't have to be the sincerity of pleading to some other being, but rather sincerity in your being, to sincerely want the best for somebody else, to be sincerely compassionate, not just that it sounds like the right thing for you to be. Maybe you even wish that you wanted something a little bit better for that person. You wish that you had a little less anger, but instead to cultivate genuine sincerity around how you are in life, And just for a moment, pause and consider your own existence, what you want in your life. Name any one thing. And if you were to pause, and if you were to think of somebody else in your position and they were 100% sincere about this value they had, how would they be living? What would their life look like with 100% sincerity around this thing that they say? Not partial sincerity, not, well, maybe this, maybe that. No, to be genuinely dedicated to a value, to something important. And to cultivate that is possible. There are methods for it. And what would your life become if, when you said, I hold this value, this truth, this important quality, this is a central aspect of my being, and you let that guide your life versus the whims and the exigencies of the world around you, what does your life become? Simple sincerity. Let that be your prayer.
I believe that true democracy can only be an outcome of nonviolence. That's from Gandhi's correspondence with the government 1942 to 1944.
To me, this is one of the most important insights that Gandhi ever reached and that he ever shared. And it really explains in very large measure why our democracy here in this country now, not to mention India or anywhere else, is faltering. The discovery of the basic principle on which democracy rests, which is, and I'm going to have to use a word here, the sanctity of the individual. The sanctity to me simply means the infinite value of the individual being much more than an individual package of reality, but being a window onto that reality. There may be better ways, more elegant ways of describing it, but it was the complete respect and value given to the human individual, on which both ahimsa, or nonviolence, and democracy are based. So you really can't have one without the other, and you can't have either unless you have both.
It's so funny that people would consider it possible that you can, for instance, have cooperation at the end of a gun. That I can have cooperation through force. That's not cooperation, that's coercion. That's bullying. That's threat and violence. And so often we do that. We make use of power plays. We force opinion. We put people in impossible positions and then expect there to be cooperation. It's the same joke as trying to bomb people into peace. You cannot create peace through bombs and guns. That's not how peace works. And it's still shocking that this is a surprise to people when they first consider it. And so if you're having a relationship at home, for instance, it's nice to bring things back to the personal level. And maybe you have an equal relationship at home. Nobody's in charge. Whoever is in your partnership, however many people are involved in your family, if everyone is equal in that relationship, everybody gets a say equally. I know that not all relationships are like that. But if it's democratic in this sense, but one person walks in with a gun, or one person walks in and says, and gives them an ultimatum, do this or else. That's no longer freedom. That's coercion. That's an unequal relationship. That's a power play. That can't go anywhere where people feel free, feel safe, feel heard. And if those are qualities that we want in our community, in our lives, whether, again, in the interpersonal level in your home, or at the level of something more complicated like a government or in the world, we have to be willing to try other ways for consensus, for growth, find possibility. And There are so many methods of nonviolence and peace available to us. It's not passive, it's very active. It simply does not involve coercion and violence and fear. You don't have to threaten anybody's family. How amazing. And if we can approach the idea of democracy the way we would approach our own interpersonal relationships, the way we would want our homes to be, then perhaps our world would be a bit safer for everybody involved.
Violence, like water, when it has an outlet, rushes forward furiously with an overwhelming force. Nonviolence cannot act madly. It is the essence of discipline. That's from March 21st, 1939.
I think Gandhi is making 2 points here. One, that violence is a force of nature, just like any other force of nature, and it responds to laws, just like the law of gravity or any other natural force. He said that many times. The other thing he's saying is that, I guess he's implying that we're conditioned to already have outlets for violence at hand, and we need training to build outlets for nonviolence. And in effect, what happens is it's the same outlets, we're just redirecting them. It's been very liberating for me to know that it's just the one psychic energy that it can go in any direction. And it's up to us to build the channels, as it were, for it to flow in the healthy direction.
There is so much possibility for peace work and nonviolence work as far as activism. It's very active. There are many active steps that you can take in order to build peace. It blows my mind. I remember reading that in my own country where I grew up, that some major organization, governmental organization, defines peace as the perpetual state of pre-war. And just on the news this morning, I think I heard yesterday, that there's an attempt to rename the Department of Justice to be the Department of War. And you can clearly see these are, the Department of Defense into the Department of War. And you can see how these are very active steps that are not peaceful in nature. They're active, violent steps. They are reframing, they're targeting, they're moving forward. And works of peace and nonviolence have to be just as active. We have to be continually helping reframe the vocabulary. We have to help people take steps cognitively, like listening to the work of Gandhi, like taking classes with Michael Nagler, Stephanie Van Hook over at the Metta Center for Nonviolence. Highly recommend you check them out. All of these qualities that we practice learning from, where we grow and we develop our ability to reach out and to make changes in the world in a way that do not promote violence, they do not promote conflict, they do not leave harmful effects behind when we're done. They do not see the world as a zero-sum game. We realize everybody can win if we do the right things. We learn that in negotiation, it's possible to help everybody be lifted up. And if we continue to see the world as something that needs to be torn to pieces so that I can have what I want, again, that's back to this I, me, mine quality, then we're lost. And we can take consistent, daily, active steps toward building nonviolence. And one of the ways you know that you're doing it is it has the quality of wisdom. It has the quality of compassion, of peace. It moves at the pace of nature. We're not pushing and forcing things to happen. We're moving steadily, continuously. That it says, like, violence like water, when it has an outlet, rushes forward furiously with an overwhelming force. And that mad, uninhibited, blind action always leads to something going wrong. But peaceful action has to be measured. It has to be wise. We need to look around and make a decision to include people. Make sure nobody's left behind, nobody gets trampled in that overwhelming force. It takes time. It looks different. But it is, again, as we know from Erica Chenoweth's work, even more effective than violent action. It just looks different, and we have to be willing to see it when it begins to happen.